There we go.
Yay. Hey, Denise, want to greet people today?
What's that?
Want to greet people today for us?
Oh, hello, friends. Welcome to our group. We're ready to discuss our topic, which is building relationships from a abuse point of view.
Yeah, Denise nailed it. I'm Holly Elissa, and I'm delighted to meet with you all again. And whether you watch this later or you're able to tune in now, we're really glad you're with us. And just want to say that the purpose of this program, as Denise said, is we are trauma survivors. And that can deter us from having great lives. It can define us. It can make us sad. It can really, really cause troubles. And it's also an opportunity to make choices for a life that's our own, make choices for a life that's full of life, make choices for a life of purpose, a life of meaning, and a life actually with an ample dose of joy. So
Right.
Denise and I are fellow travelers, and we're both looking to have that happen. And this podcast started over 4 years ago now, when this book came out, and it's called "Happiness is Running Through the Streets to Find You: Translating Trauma's Harsh Legacy into Healing." And so the whole point of that book is to invite people to come together and say, "Yeah, we had it. We had trauma. We had panic disorder. We have flashbacks. I have complex post traumatic stress disorder, and that does not have to define me." So, as Denise said, what we're going to work on today, we're going to continue. This is like a third part, but you don't have to watch 1 and 2 to be with us today. This is a third discussion on how on earth can we who are defined by trauma, who were raised in trauma, who were punished in trauma, who were disowned in trauma, who were not wanted, who were abandoned in trauma, how can we, first off, not abandon ourselves, but accept ourselves? And with that, in addition, build relationships with people who either may have been traumatized, may not have been traumatized, but they're with somebody that's traumatized. And how can we build relationships that are mutually respectful? What's another way, Denise, if you were to describe a relationship you'd like to have besides mutually respectful, what else would you be looking to have in a relationship as an
I
adult?
really want trust, that
Yes.
to build trust that, you're not going to traumatize me as well.
Mhm. That's a really good point. And also, if you do something that traumatizes me and it wasn't intentional, I can tell you, look, when you did this, that reactivated me being scared to death. And you might not even have known that. And the person will probably say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that." And then we can talk about it.
Yeah,
Uh,
oftentimes there is that uh they don't know what will trigger you. It takes a long time. I don't even know what will trigger me sometimes. So yeah, and being able to say that really hurt me. Um, can we talk about it?
if the person wants to talk about it, beautiful. And if the person can't talk about it, is not interested in talking about it, can't um, even pay attention to the fact that it's something that bothers us, that's one of those red flags to say,
Right.
yeah, to say, "I don't think so," or "we need to talk about this because this is something that I need." It's hard, but it is doable. So trust is important. Without trust, relationships can't endure.
I think another really important thing that we have to remember is that totally lost my train of thought right there.
It's okay. It'll come back. It'll come back.
It will. Um,
But you mentioned trust, and that's really important. And something else you really need to have a mutually respectful, loving relationship. I think it's the ability for the person to be self-reflective. That's another one, Denise.
Right.
I need the other person to be, I don't need them to be like me or to be like me. I just need the person to be able to look at herself, be able to look at himself and say, you know what, I've got a blind spot about that. Or you know what, that triggers my own issues. And there's a saying, what happens when your disease and my disease get together? When you get triggered and I get triggered at the same time and we're both hurting, that's really hard. I've heard a lot of people say to me recently, what they do is they come back, they feel the hurt, they shut down, or they try to talk with the other person and the talking doesn't work out, so they dissociate. But basically they're leaving. But they promise themselves, the trauma survivor promises herself, I will come back and talk with you about it.
Right.
And then we see how it goes. And then we see if the person can get it. I ended my last relationship, which went on for a long time and had a number of good healing things in it, because my partner just could not get that things hurt, that things broke my heart, that I didn't feel safe. And that was after too many times of that, I just couldn't reveal myself anymore. I
Right.
couldn't take the risk. And that was sad. We kept going to a group that would facilitate conversations between partners. And when that happened, we could talk. But then we get back home and we'd have homework to do, which is probably the case in many relationships where someone's traumatized, right? Have homework, like to not let things get buried, say more close to when something happens, hey, this is how I felt about it, let's talk about it. That was our homework, but you have to have two people in a relationship willing to do the homework. And I finally asked, I love that you can do this when we meet in a facilitated group. Can you tell me why you don't or you can't do it when it's just the two of us? And the answer that he said was, I just can't do it. I said, well, but I've seen you do it, so I know you can do it. He said, but I can't do it on my own. So then a counselor from this group volunteered to work with him, which was really great, work with him for free. And I was really hopeful, but he never followed up. So when I look back at that, Denise, and I'm sure you can look back at relationships that you thought were going to be close and connected. When I look back at that, I realized that his own fear to
Right.
face his own stuff, he just wasn't willing to do it. And I knew from the get-go that that's what I have to do. I choose to face the fear, and he couldn't or didn't. And so we grew further apart. I would go to my dear friends in recovery and say, this really bothers me. This really hurts me. I've always had close friends and I can talk with them. And after a while, I would say to myself, why am I in this relationship if my intimacy is with my close friends?
Right.
And it's not with my partner. And that it's not what I wanted. It's not what I want. So for me, for you, it's trust. I totally agree. For me, number two is to have someone who's able to reflect on themselves, on who they are, and on their own challenges. Because it's no fun, Denise, to be the psychological term the therapists use is to be the identified patient.
Right.
The one in the family that admits we've got troubles, that would be me, becomes
Right.
the identified patient, and everybody says, well, so she's the messed up one.
Right.
We don't want to be with her. Have you faced that one?
I never have, but I get it.
Yeah.
And that was actually what I was thinking of, is that I always want to be sup supported in my healing journey. Like I am here to
Mhm.
heal.
Yes.
And I want to be supported in that.
Do you think it's fair to expect that if somebody else isn't healing and doesn't need to
I
heal?
mean, we're all traumatized in this world. If you're a woman, if you have a job, I mean, really honestly, in this culture, it's
Yes.
it's quite there's always something to heal.
Well, I agree with you. And I think that, I mean, I'm willing to feel that there are some children raised in mostly non-traumatizing environments.
Yes, children could be raised not trauma, but I mean, everybody can put their hand on or grasp trauma experiences.
And yeah, I mean, even anybody who's a little bit different is going to be traumatized for being a
Right,
little.
neurodiverse now. People are coming out neurodiverse, which it's traumatic to be different.
Hmm? Yeah, I mean, it is. And I've come out, especially to doctors, as being neurodiverse. I tell them right up front, I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder that comes from a childhood of violence and abuse. And there are certain things that will provoke me. And one of them is anything to do with my mouth or my throat. If I feel at all like anything is going to be put down my throat, I'm going to resist, and I've got a horrible gag. I've got to really take care of myself, gag response. But if you don't know where that's coming from, then you might think I'm just being difficult.
Right.
Like with dentists, do you ever talk with a dentist? Or are you okay with dentists?
I am not okay with dentists, and actually, I did tell I had dental surgery
Mm,
one time, and I did tell the dentist that I'm a abuse survivor, and I might want to kick you or hit you if something feels weird.
mm-hmm,
And he just kind of like, yeah, yeah, yeah. He was a big
mm,
guy too. Like I wouldn't have hurt him. He did not. Uh, he did not understand that, so he couldn't be my partner.
yeah. But did you feel safe enough going
I
through the
did
surgery?
feel safe the whole time, but I wasn't triggered during that experience.
What do you feel helped you feel safe?
What makes me feel unsafe?
No, in that situation, yes, but in that situation, you were with somebody, you told him you were a survivor. You told him that you might feel like you needed to act out, and that's not a rational place we're coming from when we act out. And he
Right.
sort of laughed and didn't get it. And you decided to go ahead,
Right.
and have the surgery done. So there must have been something that made that possible for you. What was it that helped you decide, okay, I'm going to have this done regardless of whether this guy gets my trauma?
Probably because he's a doctor and I just have that training of we do what they say.
Hmm. Okay,
And
I'm
nothing
glad.
triggered me. I did not get triggered. So if I would have been triggered and acted out, then we would have had to deal with it then.
Mhm. I hear you, and I too have had uh, situations with dentists or doctors where I've said to them, "Look, I'm a complex post-traumatic, I'm a trauma survivor, and blah blah." And I met with this really excellent in terms of competency oral surgeon, my dentist, whom I trust and gets it about trauma, and I refer people to him. Said this is the best guy. He's the best guy. Now he's not just definitely, he definitely doesn't have the best how can I say, doesn't have the best bedside manner. So he might not understand, but he's going to do the best job by you. So I made a decision to go to him that if he was the best, you're right, competency matters. And two, as long as he would listen to me, I would be okay. So I went in early and I said to him, look, here are the things I'm going to do to counter the panic from taking over. And here's what I need from you. And I told him three things, Denise. I said, you need to tell me how long it's taking, how much longer it's going to take, and sometimes break it down if you're doing things in parts. Tell me how many minutes is this part going to take? How much more time before this is done? Secondly, tell me and show me what you're doing. Because if I can see and know what you're going to do beforehand, great. And third, listen to me. If I say I need to stop, stop. He agreed to those things, but he was basically like he was he had he did not lack in self-esteem. And so he said, I'll have this done before you know it. You won't even know what happened. And I knew what he was telling me in his own way was, I'll get this done quickly. You won't even think, you won't even
Right,
know what happened. But you know what? That's not the case. What you said before is powerful. We can be triggered by things we don't even see. Like, what's
right.
a trigger? Can you name some triggers that are seen but also unseen? It's the felt ones that are the hardest.
I can't really put my finger on any right this moment. Um,
So let me try a few and see if some get suggested to
Triggers,
you.
yeah.
So if I hear a gunshot, that's really scary to me, and I will be hyper vigilant. Why? Because when I was growing up, there was one of my classmates shot another classmate, and no one would talk about it because the two guys were gay and they were meeting, and they had built a little place in the woods where they met. And no one would talk about them being gay. No one would talk about the murder. No one would talk about it. So whenever I heard a gunshot, that was a trigger for me. Whenever I heard an ambulance, that was a trigger because my father, oh dear, he would have heart attacks, and part of the abuse was, or he would say, I feel like I'm having a heart attack. And part of the abuse, Denise, was he would say to me, come over here and rub my chest. But it wasn't just rubbing his chest. And I got that. And so whenever I heard a siren going by, I would always I would just be terrified because I thought something's happened to my father and I am responsible for his well being.
Right.
Also, a man who would look at me with a sadistic look. And it's easy for me to know what a sadistic look looks like. Do you know what that looks like?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so my father was sadistic, so I was raised on sadistic looks, and they meant I'm gonna do something to you. And I had a vice principal in junior high and high school who was a sadist also, and he would give me the same kind of look. And I was so angry at him. It turned out he was an alcoholic and he died in a car crash. But I was so angry at him that when I went back to my high school, um, there was a painting of him in the library. And I climbed up on the library table and I stuck my finger up the nose. And I realized in that moment the utter rage I had at this man who would cooperate. He would go along with my father. He'd say to me things like, even if you're right, it doesn't matter. Even if you didn't do anything wrong, it doesn't matter. I've already told your father. And sadist to sadist, having told my father, that meant I was going to be abused.
Right.
And he enjoyed that. It's really hard to accept that people enjoy seeing people get hurt.
Right.
Have you seen that in your own
I
experience?
don't think so. Or maybe I denied it, but I don't think I've seen that. My triggers, I really only have one trigger that I know that is really physical, which is
Okay.
when I'm actually involved in intimacy.
Mm.
That's when I get triggered.
And is it
So
something that you don't have to talk about if it's too personal, but is it something that gets done or said, or it's just a feeling that comes
us,
up?
I get like stiff. My whole body gets stiff and I
Mhm.
shake and
Mhm.
It's really overwhelmed. The whole body is involved. And, it
Hmm,
takes a long time to calm back down.
I hear you. And that's really hard. And what does help you? What from the inside of you helps? What can you do inside?
Breathing, taking deep breaths, and telling myself, I am safe. I am here. I am safe. I am here. I am safe. I'm in a different place.
I'm not 4 years old. I'm not 3 years old. I'm not 12.
Right. Mine was like 14. So,
I'm not 14 years old. Yeah. So we can do things inside of ourselves, like breathe and yeah, I talk to myself too. Like
right. Self-conversation.
I call myself sweetheart. Hey, sweetheart. Sweetheart, it's okay. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to feel out of control. It's okay to not feel safe. It's okay. And then I sometimes talk with a little girl and say, I'm going to take care of you. Nobody's going to hurt you. I'm going to make sure that nobody hurts you again. And that might mean that you might need to I'll walk you right out there until we can see Marina, because Marina was a child care director that every little kid I knew and loved. They trusted her, and she was a trauma survivor, so she knew what she was doing. So I would say, look, I'm going to take you outside to the meadow. Marina's going to be waiting. Are you okay with me? I love Marina. Okay, so when you get to be with Marina, I want you to know, number one, you're going to be safe. Marina will take care of you, and if there's any problem, Marina will let me know and we'll take care of it together, all three of us, but Marina and me mostly. But if anything bothers you, you can tell Marina. You can tell her what's going on. So I have all this conversation with her, and by the time I have this conversation with her, she's feeling more safe, more
Right.
loved. And then if I've got something to deal with in the moment, like supposing I'm angry, which happens, anger was not allowed when I was a child. I could not have anger. And I think you keep saying, rightfully so, Denise, that that's part of being raised a girl
Right.
of our era. Were you allowed to have anger?
No,
You did it though.
we weren't allowed to have any emotional expression really, because my sister had huge ones, and
Mm-hmm.
it was horrible for everyone, is how they put it. I got to get a cough drop. They, in the family dynamics,
Mm-hmm.
she was a big pain in the neck, and she got all the emotions. Nobody else could have any.
Isn't that interesting that that's usually what happens in families? That there's one person, like either the identified patient, who's the poor thing,
Right, poor little thing.
poor little thing. But the benefit of being a poor thing is that maybe she gets help and she gets to be off the charts because
Right,
she's sick. Now that happened in my family, but it wasn't any of the children. It was my mother. My mother was traumatized as a child. I believe she was an alcoholic father that committed incest with her, and her way of surviving was to just go crazy. And I don't know if this would apply to your sister or not, but my mother would just go into this place, and I could see her going there of moaning, screaming, wailing, weeping. And she was so scary. She was scary, so scary for the rest of us. She's the only one that could do that.
right. Yeah, that my sister was scary. It was scary because her emotions were so enormous. And
What did you do for yourself when that was taking place?
go ride my bike.
So if you could get outside, it was great. What about at night?
I don't know. Just get away from her. Just try to stay away from her. Which also strained, like we still have a strained relationship because she was the family identified patient, so I avoided her. I stayed away from her.
And you know me too. I want to say two things. One, when my mother was collapsing into one of those states, she was becoming a different person.
Right,
She became a different person, and she was like a banshee. She was like a wounded bear. She was just a totally scary, terrifying, like the gates of hell opening up. That's how scary it felt like sometimes. And um, I got as far away as I could. If I could get out of the house, I could. But I discovered that a lot of times it would happen at night. And by the way, this might be a good time since I'm drinking water, you're drinking water,
right.
to remind people, please take care of yourself. Denise, what are a couple things that our viewers could do to take care of themselves if things we're talking about can be triggering or troublesome
Right,
to
or
them?
upsetting. You can take breaths,
Mm-hmm.
really intentional, and drink water. It really helps.
And the third thing that helps me in the moment is to say, um, Denise and people listening, my throat's getting tight. Mm-hmm. My throat's getting tight, and that's usually a sign that I'm getting scared or I'm feeling some fear.
Or I've heard you say my hands are getting sweaty.
Yeah, right here. I can look at my palms of my hands and feel them. If they're sweaty, I'm not just going to get rid of the sweat. I'm going to say that's a sign to me that I'm afraid, that fear is in my system. And the other thing we want to offer you guys is we have discovered that almost every state, but not every state in the United States, has a trauma warm line. And if you simply look up right now, iPhone, trauma warm line, you'll see a list state by state. And if you have one in your state, there you go. What I love now is that you can text. So if you're in the middle of a meeting and you're feeling scared to death, which trust me happens, you can just text that warm line and just say, look, I'm in the meeting and I'm having a bad panic attack, or I feel one coming on. Can you help? Those people will text you back, and it's confidential and it's safe. And they are trauma survivors too. And they know. You can also call them. Some of them are 24/7, some of them are not. And if you're in a state like Kentucky that didn't have them, nearby, you'll find like Cincinnati has a 24/7 one. So I often post the Cincinnati number. So I just want to say is we're all about inviting you to take care of yourself as we take care of ourselves. And this has been a hard conversation because Denise and I both grew up with mental illness in our families. Denise, do you think mental illness is part and parcel or goes along with trauma?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's how we cope, like disassociate or associate. Is that how you
Mhm.
say it? Disassociate?
You got it. You said it. Just do we disassociate or dissociate, however people choose to say it. I've looked it up and it's both ways. But that's how I survived, sweetie. When my mother was going crazy, she'd probably would be at night and she'd be in another part of the house. And it was often in her bedroom. Um, and what I've come to find out, and since if you need to put up your boundaries to hear this, I'm going to say it as objectively as I can. What I've come to find out is that it's often, as you said, the act of intimacy that often happens in the dark, in the night, that triggers scared feelings. And so my mother would start making these horrible sounds in the night. I'm sure it would get my father away from her. But at the same time, it froze and made the whole house totally unsafe and crazy.
Right.
And it was so hard. If I could get out, I would, but I often couldn't get out. So what I did was what we all know, which is what you just said. I dissociated. I just pictured myself. And I probably would do well like you do to draw image of this or watercolor it. How I just went out the window. Window didn't have to be open. I just could telecommute or something, out the window and start climbing up, going up above the rooftops where it was safer, where no one could touch me or hurt me or scream, and I wouldn't hear the screaming anymore. And I would just keep going up until I could be safe and sit on the moon. If the moon was in one of those sliver
Crescent
things,
shape, right?
crescent moons, I'd sit there for a while and swing my feet and sing a little bit. And if I was still scared, I would head on up to heaven or head on up to the stars. And that's what I believed in. I believed it as a child. When you would do that, did you believe it, or was it something that you just knew you had to do?
When I was flying with my angel, I knew it, I felt it. But during abuse, I would just go up in the corner in a little uh bubble, kind of a little
Mm,
bubble, and just be there, and nothing could penetrate. I
mm.
never really went to a imaginary place, or just that bubble up in the corner.
Well,
And
hey,
sometimes I could look down and watch, and I would tell myself, you remember this. You're not going to forget this.
see now, and I'm breathing out, which is a sign of, because what you just said is true for me too, that from as early as I can remember, I would tell myself, remember this moment. Remember this moment. There's something not right here. There's something wrong here. Remember this moment. And I think that's part of why I was able to remember the things that happened.
Right. Like, my sister does not remember anything ever happening in our childhood that was inappropriate. And so therefore she's not on a healing path. You
I
know,
hear you. It's
she
really, yeah, go ahead.
she will I don't know, still go to her triggers, or she gets mad. My other, it's not the mental health sister, a different sister, but she doesn't remember anything happening, and I wanted to remember so that it cannot happen again.
That's one really strong reason for to remember. And the other really strong reason to remember is to recall that I didn't make it up.
Right.
One of the hardest, I think I mentioned I did in the book that I have only once been to an incest survivors meeting. Have you ever you've been to them?
I joined a group on AOL a long time ago, and we would have weekly meetings. We'd have 3 weeks meetings a week,
Right.
but it wasn't officially on that. I mean, we were all incest survivors. That was the title of our thing,
Mhm.
but there was no professional person. We were just creative writing, and then we'd have meetings.
So you guys were doing a self-help group and you
Yes.
were supporting each other and you had an organization to do it. And what did you guys do if somebody got upset?
We would focus on them, and we had a really strong ritual. We still do. Every Monday night, I
Oh,
sign
good.
on, and yeah, I sign on, and back then it was more creative because there were more people. Now there's just the two of us, so we don't have
Yeah.
to put out the beanbag chairs and pull the curtains down and choose your color and talk about that. We, make people comfortable. But if somebody was in, plus we had parameters
Hmm.
of when the group was over. The time was 1 hour, and if someone was triggered during that, they could engage with someone in a private chat, after, but mostly we stuck with those specific guidelines. And my friend, Debbie, she had been in therapy, so she knew the way it went. I had never been in therapy, so I was just there playing around, trying to heal, really.
Trying to heal. Right. No,
Right.
I believe you were there trying to heal because you'd mentioned that group a number of times and it mattered. So it
It
must
did.
have helped.
Yeah. Well, we found out you help yourself when you help others.
Yes.
That's what we found out in that group. And we still meet and we always say the same things at the beginning and say the same things at the end, just so we have safety.
Yes. You and I could think of that here. You know, we basically greet people and at the end we say goodbye to people. But as you're talking, I'm realizing there have been times that we've gone over. We're not doing that anymore if we can help it. But there have been times when we've gone over because I feel like, oh my God, we just got into something really good. But I think people, you're right, Denise, people need to be able to count on, like right now, we've got uh, 20 minutes left.
Right.
Yeah, 20 minutes left. So you need to count on that. And
I remember when we were
yeah,
in that other group, when it was
from
UK,
England. Yes.
right? And sometimes you would go over and I would just start getting very anxious
Oh my gosh.
as it
Yes.
got longer. Like wanted it, I wanted it to stay within those parameters, of what
Yes.
3 to 4 o'clock. That's it.
Good point,
So,
Denise. Thank you for that. Thank you for saying that. And I acknowledge that. That's
but I mean,
true.
I would stay and listen and support the conversation, but I would start to feel that,
Yep.
a little, ugh, I gotta go. I gotta get out of here.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you said that. And if that starts to happen here, we can call it early as well. I mean,
Well, if I have the hour
you got
set
it. You
in my
could do it.
mind, right,
Okay. And I'm going to say to myself, if something happens during the hour that makes me really sad or scared, I will say that out loud because I've been in trauma recovery with trauma therapists for going on 10 years. And because I needed it so much in the first 4 or 5 years, I went twice a week. I'm used to, thank God, I'm used to when I start feeling something scary, I'm used to calling it in the moment
right,
um, and saying, this is hard for me. Like it is hard. It's hard to think about being with a mentally ill person, growing up with a mentally ill person. The house was never safe.
right,
Was wasn't safe for other reasons either. But you couldn't predict when your sister was going to get out of control.
right. And that she would be disciplined, and the discipline was harsh, and we had to witness that
Oh, and hurting
person that's
special
already triggered.
a person who's special needs.
Right.
Hurting doesn't do it.
It wasn't good.
I don't think hurting helps anybody.
No, I don't think so either. I don't think, what do they call it? Aversion, when they do,
Yet, tell me
subject you
about
to it.
what does that mean?
When they subject you to, like, if you're afraid of heights.
Oh, that's what you okay. Aversion therapy, aversion treatment.
Yeah,
Oh, right. They take you up high until
right.
you
I
get
don't, because you have that fear, don't you, of
I
heights?
do, and I'm so much better with it. But I'm better with it because I have slowly gotten down into what scared me so much and brought it up out of me. So what would happen with me when I could still have it happen if I have to look straight down from like 20 stories. Sometimes I talk myself through it. I
Right,
talk myself to the elevator. I don't go crazy. Or or when I was in Sri Lanka one time, I was staying at this Hilton Inn, and the place for the club where if you travel a lot, the club where you could go up and meet people and talk and um, have food and drinks and whatever. Usually had a good view, which meant it was usually up high. So in Sri Lanka on the
right,
18th floor was this club, and I wanted to go up there and meet people because I didn't know anybody. Was supposed to go to India, and India got rained out. It was like a monsoon. The airport couldn't open. So I stayed. I decided, okay, I'm going to stay in Sri Lanka, get to know Sri Lanka. But I didn't know anyone. So I went up to the 18th floor and I did things to stay there. I would sit away from looking straight down.
right.
I befriended people and I'd say to them, I've got a fear of heights, but as long as we can talk, I'm going to be okay. And if I need to leave, it's just because I'm starting to feel anxious. I'll tell you about it. And when I told them about it, they would say, "Come on, girl, we love you. You're fine. You're doing great. We're right
Right.
here with you." And that, see, for me, connection as a trauma survivor always matters. If I feel I'm connected with someone, heart to heart, soul to soul, and I can see the person and they can see me, I feel
You're
much
gonna be
better.
okay. Right.
But the thing is, as kids, sweetie,
Right.
we didn't have parents that could say no. I mean, I think your sister got help, right?
She went to a psychiatrist, but I don't think she never got help, really. She's been
Hmm.
on meds her whole life, and none of them really. I mean, she believes there's whatever one med helps her, but they tried to take her off of it not too long ago because of medical things, whatever. They
Mm-hmm.
don't want you to be on the same medicine for so long, but she made them put her back on it because she got used to it, that one med, and now
Yeah,
it's more regulated, and but her doctor understood. It didn't take a month to realize that, yeah, she needed that. But she
I
never
hear you.
really got the help she needed. She's still not always stable.
And my mother was still not always stable. My mother used religion um, to um, restore herself. But sometimes the religion was shaming and abusive, and sadly that scared me because that was just another way of getting abused.
Right,
But she did what she had to do, and she did what you also said. She helped other people,
right. It really
and
helps to feel like what you went through can support somebody else.
mhm. So we've got like less than 15 minutes left, and let's if we can return to our topic of what do we need from within ourselves and from without ourselves to have a secure, loving, respectful relationship in which we as trauma survivors can continue to heal. And just for the sake of ourselves and people listening, the first thing you said was trust. The second thing we said was, what did I say?
The second thing was not genuine, but like genuine.
Oh, that was it. It was, you got it. Thank you for the trigger, for the reminder, the glimmer. The glimmer reminder is someone who can be self reflective,
Right,
someone who could look at herself or himself and say, "You know what? I didn't know that about myself. Thank you for sharing that." Or, "I couldn't hear you last night because I was so upset that you were upset." Or you know what? I can be very slow. My emotions can be slow, or rather, it's slow for me to get in touch with them. But I'm ready to talk about it now, which often means somebody has her own therapist too.
right. Yeah,
Like,
I mean, these are definitely skills that can be learned.
yes. So, number one, we need to build trust. Number two, I need somebody who's going to be able to look at herself and not just see me as the person that's got all these troubles, because I'm
Right. The troubled one.
troubled one. You got to see my courage too. That's a big part of who you are and who I am, Denise.
Right. And that's
Courage.
what
Hmm.
they have to be able to see, that how much courage it takes
Yes.
to be vulnerable, to be intimate, to be genuine. It takes courage.
Can you help us understand that? I intuitively know what you're talking about, that it takes courage to show up,
Right.
sometimes,
Yeah.
like I'm not like you went to your class every day, and I'm not sure every day you felt courageous enough to
Right.
go there. So how did you had rituals with your kids when they came in, that worked really well. Did you have rituals with yourself too before you walked in the
I
door?
did. I do it at story time too. I
Mm,
arrive early. I have to arrive early and just, survey the situation. And I really pray for myself, I guess is what it is. I put out a rubber floor for story time. And while I'm putting that out, I'm talking to myself, what song's going to be the best one today? Uh, which which props are super clean right now because I disinfected them, or I try to focus on I am here, I am safe. And
mm,
putting that floor out really defines the area.
yes.
This is mine, this is my safety right here. And I do it beforehand. And it used to be that people would come early and we push the cars around with the floors. I have little chevron cars that I push around on the floors. But since GPS, people arrive exactly on time. It's so interesting.
It is. That's a change.
It is a change, yep.
But
And
you are always early, girl. You're always early. So you have this time, and you were about to say something else.
well, so now instead of playing with the cars, rolling them around on the floor beforehand, we do it before we start story time. I, allow for a few minutes to play with their little cars with faces, and they're very conversational. And, even with a infant, or not an infant, but a very young toddler, you can push the car and they can figure out, like this little girl, she couldn't figure out how to push it on Saturday. She would just like hit it. And her dad was so incredibly patient and
Uh,
loving, and he put her hand on top and and he
uh,
taught her how to push the car in such a loving way. This is what I love going to story time, because the people that bring their children, they
yeah,
want to be in public with their children, and for
yeah.
those kids to be experiencing social skills, and oh, he's so good. He was so good with her.
Oh, I love
And
hearing
he
that.
Yeah, and I get happy that, that makes me happy that there are men in this world who know how to treat a girl.
Yes. Know how to raise a girl.
Right,
Yeah. God, that's beautiful. I still, and if I were to have a partner, the partner would need to know this. I can just stop in my tracks when I see a parent being loving to a child. I just stop in my tracks and just, I mean, I'm not trying to make anybody self-conscious, but when I see that happening, and I see that a lot because of our early childhood field, when
right,
I see a teacher being so wonderful with a classroom or with
right.
one
When
child,
you
or
see a teacher bend down eye level, I'm like, yes.
whenever I see Princess Catherine in England, whenever she's with kids, she just gets right down. And he does too, and they're both
Yeah,
tall. I love that. And
yeah,
they were
he's tall, so
like 6'5" and she's 5'9" or something.
it's really
So
helpful for them to
yeah,
get eye level.
I love
Yeah, I
that.
do. I actually comment. Like, there's this one father, the girls now, I think she's in eighth grade or something, but she used to come to Black Kite Coffee, and I used to tell them, what you're doing is so worth it. Thank you for taking the time to do this with your, he explained everything to her. And she
Mm-hmm.
was like a sensitive kid that got triggered easily, or, emotional. And well, every time I told him a million times, you're doing it. It's going to make a difference in the future. I
So good.
sometimes have to comment. I don't always have to comment, but
I do. I do. I stop in my tracks. I mean, back to one thing that helps me to prepare, because what I often do is go into groups of adults, and they can be scary sometimes,
heck yeah,
really scary. And who knows what kind of mood they're in, what they've just been through. Maybe they don't want to be there. Maybe they have to be there. Maybe they got to get credits. So what I have done for years is just walking. I always get there early too, so I can walk around the group. It could be 1,000, could be 30. Walk around the group and say, "Hey, I'm Holly Elissa. I'm from Boston. How you doing? What? Yeah, just introducing myself. And if I connect with someone right away, which I often do, because we can tell fellow
right.
travelers,
We know who
And
to
so
walk up to.
we know who to walk up to, honey. And so when I sense that somebody's right there with me, and then I say, may I ask you a question? And the person says, of course. And I say, look, if you would say a prayer for me, that would really help because I can get scared before I go up there. Or if you could say a prayer for all of us, that I be a vehicle and a voice for what these people need to hear to
Right, for the ears to hear.
exactly. And you know what? Almost always the person nods, takes my hand, prays out loud, just the two of us.
Right.
And it's so beautiful. And then I say, thank you. I'm all good now. It was just the
Especially Black women are able to do that, to go to the Lord, they
right,
do it so
right in the
easily.
moment.
That's who I'm gonna
Yeah.
ask, if I want a prayer,
Mhm.
because there's
I
passion
get that.
and yeah,
Mhm. And it's okay because going to Black churches, people are really talking directly with God. It's
right,
not like the preacher. I mean, there is a preacher, but people get to go right up front. And so anyway, now we're down to 5 minutes.
right.
But it's anyway, what we're doing is talking here about two things now. One is how we take care of ourselves. And we need to do that because, and if you're listening and you're a trauma survivor, I speaking for me, I cannot always tell when a trigger is going to come because it can be something I can't see. If I see a big man walking in the room and he looks sadistic, and how does it look sadistic? It's a nasty kind of superiority, condescending look.
Right.
I'm going to take care of myself. But if all of a sudden I turn around and this guy's coming toward me, ugh, I just swallowed. I could just feel I just swallowed of water to help. But it's the things that are on scene that really can bother me. There are smells, for example, that remind me of going to my grandmother's house, the grandmother that had mental illness. And those smells were, I don't very often encounter them anymore because they were old fashioned furnaces and stuff, and this belching smell of the furnace. But if I get that smell again, I feel unsafe.
Sometimes you can get a smell that's not even there, a phantom smell. Like I would get a
Oh,
doctor's office phantom smell,
oh, yeah, I
which I don't
believe
even
it.
know what it was. It wasn't bleach, but maybe alcohol, the rubbing alcohol. But
Yeah.
sometimes I get that smell,
Oh, wow. So
like a
wherever you
phantom
were,
smell. Nobody else could smell it, but I could.
that's
And
interesting.
yeah, I think that's like a trigger of something too. I haven't fully worked with that, but I think that smell is telling me something.
That's really powerful because that suggests, and we'll have to find out about this, but that suggests that in a scary situation, our olfactory system can be triggered. And what I think I'm understanding, because I keep reading all this stuff, is that the olfactory system gets triggered more quickly
Uh,
than some of the other systems. So if
that could
I,
be like the first warning sign or whatever.
yeah, and honey, for trauma survivors, if I feel unsafe, then I'll probably start remembering what it smelled like.
Right.
Um, I never will forget. I loved George Gershwin. He was amazing, composer. He only lived to be 38. He had a really close relationship with Fred Astaire. He would write music for Fred Astaire to dance to. And when he died, he had some kind of brain tumor or something. He smelled like metal burning. And he died shortly after that. But that's what he remarked to some of the people that he smelled metal burning. And
Huh.
I always took that as a sign. If I'm smelling metal burning, sweetie, we have 2 minutes left. So what I'm going to invite us both to do is to close on time out of respect and just ask if there's anything you would like to share or invite people to consider as we continue on the subject of how can we have loving, healing relationships, being honest with ourselves that we are trauma survivors.
We have to keep on healing. That's all. Keep on healing and keep finding things that help you express. That's it.
Yeah, I agree with you. So what's one way? No, I guess we got 1 minute left.
Art,
Hey,
music, some people listen to music and that is comforting. I like to cut things and draw things and mold with clay. There's, we have to develop our hobbies. That's how we
yes.
know what we like too, because a lot of times we've denied our own desires
Mhm.
in our growing up. And so the way that you find out what you like is trying things,
And I'll
hobbies.
close. No, I hear you. It's to, yeah, and it's for me, I have a fear of doing things with my hands. And it comes from my mother taking things. I was the youngest. My mother, when she was in a bad state, would just take things out of my hands. Can't you do anything right? Or here, I'll do it for you faster. So I didn't feel like I had much capacity with my hands. I did, but I didn't feel like I did. And so,
Right,
I did watercolors and I still love to do watercolors. So I just, that's something I can get back into. But what I want to say in my remaining, because time is up, is that what I learned to do as a child was to garden. And I felt safe outside with both my mother and father because we were in plain sight. And so
right.
I would help them plant things and I would learn how to plant things. And when they were working in the garden, I think they felt relief. And so I have all kinds of wonderful feelings. In fact, I can overdo in the garden. I can work so hard that I don't want to stop.
Right.
But my gardens, I'll just keep posting pictures of my gardens. I have all
You
kinds.
also go walking in different gardens and around you.
Exactly. So it's two things. It's getting outside that heals me. And I know the research, Denise, if anybody listening, 10 minutes outside in the rhythms of nature, even in a city, to go by a tree, go hang by a tree in a city, and in 10 minutes, we'll get in touch.
A reset, right.
We will reset that button. In fact, one of my friends gave me this, another trauma survivor gave me this,
Reset.
which it says reset. Tutto di facile in Italian means it's all going to be good. It's going to be good.
Yep.
So, sweetie, thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
it's been a pleasure being with you. And I hope to hear that you have found you some monarch butterflies doing
My
their
first
thing.
butterfly eggs. That's
Yeah.
the next step. Woohoo.
Oh, I'm excited about that. And I've got some phlox and some pansies I want to plant because they're going to seed themselves. Those pansies do. I didn't know that. So I
Right.
have a neighbor that she's got pansies coming up. So anyway, love you and people that are with us, however, whenever, we're so glad. And we
Yep.
wish you great
We wish,
healing.
right. We wish to assist in your healing
So
and in
God
our own.
bless. Healing everywhere, honey, because our hearts open to healing.